Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are. I'm just watching all the intros coming in on the chat, and it's fantastic. There's Tokyo, Miami, Canada, Pennsylvania, Nottingham up the road. Just brilliant. So love the intros coming in as you're joining. So thanks very much for that. So welcome to another Evernym webinar on the topic of decentralized identity. I see a lot of return visitors and a lot of new ones as well. So welcome to everyone who's coming for the first time. My name's Andy Tobin. I work for Evernym, and I have the joy of running these webinars, which is always fascinating. We run these regularly to keep you informed of the latest developments in the space of decentralized identity, so you can learn faster and implement faster. The last webinar we had was an absolute cracker. It was our most popular one yet, and it covered the shenanigans at the World Wide Web Consortium around the objections to the DID spec from Google, Apple, and Mozilla. And yeah, crikey, it's no surprise that Tim Berners-Lee himself entered the fray a few days ago, lamenting Google's control over W3C and their 100+ employees that they've deployed onto W3C business. So yeah, I think this one's going to run and run, so watch this space. Today, we're going to look at a shift that we're seeing from existing federated identity models towards more decentralized self-sovereign models. And in particular, we'll be looking at it from a government identity scheme perspective. Without further ado, I'm joined by two experts in the field today, and I have Christine and Drummond with me. So if you folks could just come off video a sec. And Christine, would you mind just giving us a quick intro to yourself, where you work, what you do, and how you're involved in this decentralized identity space?
Sure. Thank you, Andy. Christine Leong. Hi, everybody. I'm from Accenture. I'm the global lead for decentralized ID and biometrics for Accenture. So really great to be on this webinar with you all.
Thanks very much, Christine. And Drummond, quick intro from you. Well, everyone knows Drummond anyway, but there might be a person here who hasn't come across you, Drummond. So a quick intro just in case.
Thanks, Andy. Drummond Reed. I'm at Evernym, Chief Trust Officer, and I work extensively on the underlying standards and protocols and infrastructure we need for self-sovereign identity. At W3C, I'm a co-editor of the DID specification and working every day on completing the job there of having that ultimately approved there. So of course,
what's the latest there, John? What was the reaction to the last webinar we did? Did you get lynched, or was it okay?
Oh no, it was we had yeah, it was great. I think there's a lot of wonderful momentum. The latest news is that the process that W3C is undergoing, because they're shifting to what they call director lists at the point when Tim finally retires, it's gonna take into January for the ultimate decision. But I think our webinar helped, and anyone who feels that should be moving forward, make sure to let your W3C representative know.
Very good. Thanks very much. Well, thanks for the intros. If you guys want to just face mute again, I'll just crack on with the first bit and the agenda. So a pretty simple, concise agenda today. So I'll be doing a little bit of a primer for you on what we mean by federated to decentralized. What does that mean? And some examples, particularly in the government ID space. And then really it's going to be Christine and Drummond talking through what they're seeing out there in the world. Two of the best connected people that you'll come across with huge amounts of experience. So we'll be quizzing them on what they're seeing in the world. As per usual, we are recording this webinar. We do it every time. It'll be available on our website, evernym.com/webinars. And as usual, we love your questions, and we get so many of them, and we've already had a whole bunch coming in beforehand. We'll cover as many as we can in the time we've got. If you've got any questions, if you can use the Zoom Q&A facility, so the chat, let's leave the chat as chat between everybody. But the Zoom Q&A, if you've got a question you want me to raise, drop it in there. And behind the scenes, Alex, our webinar whisperer, gathers them all together, and we'll cover as many as possible. So questions in the Zoom Q&A, chat in the chat. So without further ado, let's get into the meat of the whole thing here today. At Evernym, we get a lot of calls and emails from organizations around the world wanting to get SSI projects started. And there's a huge variety from world-spanning ecosystems to small, concise POCs. And the number of calls we've been taking has been ratcheting up and up since the summer break. And I imagine we're seeing just like a fraction of the activity that's actually going on out there. This slide is about 2 weeks old, and there have been a number of new initiatives since then. And this is just, what we're seeing. And our friends at Checked put this one together as well. So there's a lot happening out there, and there's even more than, this is just what we see. So let's dissect this mega trend, right? This move of digital identity. We first showed a version of this diagram about probably nearly 6 years ago now, actually, when SSI was like a minor technical quirk in the digital universe. And as you saw on the last slide, the benefits of a decentralized digital identity approach seems to be cutting through now. Momentum is increasing. So I just want to do a quick review of the terminology for those who may be a bit new to this. There's a lot of terminology in this space. There's a lot of acronyms, and we just have to kind of navigate our way through all this. So when we think about centralized identity, what we mean is like a single facility that you log into to do something. For example, your employer's expenses system, right? They give you an account, you log in, you do a single function there. You can't really use that information anywhere else, and it's locked in, single purpose, not portable. Federated identity is a step towards linking different silos of data or services together. And you generally have one service that provides confirmation of who you are to other linked services. And sometimes the prime motivation for doing this is to track everything you do online, encouraging you to participate by giving you a simple user experience. And this would be the case for login with Facebook or Google, for example. It's to their advantage to know that you're visiting another website to log in, because they can then piece together more about you. Others are more benign, such as single sign-on for multiple systems at your employer. Others, for example, letting you sign into government systems in countries you might be visiting, such as eIDAS in Europe, and we'll be covering that in a bit more detail in a second. Federated mechanisms tend to be limited in their use cases, and they're obviously controlled by a central provider who says that you are you, who determines what you can and can't do. So you have no real control. You don't own the data that's being moved around, and that central provider can turn you off. Decentralized self-sovereign identity is the next step in the evolution chain. It's open. There's no single central provider who controls what you do. You can move any data for any purpose wrapped in a verifiable credential envelope. Anybody can issue any credentials. Anyone can verify them for any purpose, any use case. It's privacy-centric by design, and you, the user, are the locus of control. So you're in charge, and that's the big difference. So here's an example of a federated identity scheme used in government. And this is the European eIDAS scheme. And the way it works is each country has a node, and connected to that node are a number of identity providers or trusted service providers or qualified trusted service providers who verify that you are you. And when they verify that you are you using certain mechanisms and policies set down by the EU, they give you an account in their system, and they have some data about you, your name, date of birth, citizenship, etc. And if in this case we've got the person who is a citizen of member state 2 of Ireland, if they then go to the Netherlands and want to open an account with a bank, which would be the service provider, what they do is the bank offers them up an eIDAS login capability. The person logs into that, well, they go to that gets routed through the eIDAS node to their home IDP. And they then log into their home IDP, and the home IDP passes back some information through the eIDAS nodes back to the service provider that says Andy is Andy, and you can let him in. And here's a bit of data about it. So that's kind of how it works. We could go into endless technical detail about it, but we'll keep it at that sort of level for now. The login experience for a citizen looks a bit like this. So I grabbed these screenshots yesterday just to put in this presentation. It would tend to start off with, if you're at the bank you want to get an account with. I don't know why we always use banks, but anyway, we'll use a bank in this case. You're trying to get an account with a bank, and they'll have something on their login page says login with eIDAS, and you go, okay, I'm going to log in with eIDAS, and what happens is you'll get surfaced a page of flags. So you have to pick your home country flag. In this case, back to the previous slide, this would be Ireland, right? You pick your home country flag, and I'm just looking to see if Ireland is on there. So Ireland is grayed out on this one, so I wouldn't be able to do this for this particular service because Ireland is grayed out. But anyway, let's say it was okay. And then you get to, in this case, it was another page that says, which of these two mechanisms are you going to use? And if I said SPID, it then gives me the list of all the identity providers in the country. This is actually Italy, this one. In Italy that I could authenticate myself, that I might have set an account up with, and then I select the identity provider, and then I go and I log in to them. And once I log into them, they will confirm back to the bank that I've logged in and here's some information about me. So you can see some difficulties with this, a large business, like let's say it's an e-commerce business, a bank, etc. They're going to spend a lot of time on their user experience to make it as beautiful and frictionless as possible. And we're introducing quite a lot of complexity. And I have to say, by the time I got to the InfoCert login, I'd actually forgotten what it was I was trying to do in the first place. So let's contrast that with login using SSI, self-sovereign identity techniques. Not only can you log in with that username or password, but you can also pass verifiable information in the login transaction itself, such as who you are, your entitlements, your system access rights, which can all be verified as authentic in moments without needing to link together lots of nodes and connections and attribute exchanges. And this means that any service like a bank, a telco, a retailer doesn't have to subvert their whole beautifully designed login flow. Instead, they get much faster login, much less friction, and very high security with verifiable user data. So lots to like there. If we take the eIDAS thing to a further level where you're trying to move more information about somebody, this slide was taken from a project a couple of years back at the Open Identity Exchange in the UK, where I can only call it a Frankenstein combination of Mobile Connect, eIDAS, and attribute exchange hubs was being designed to achieve data portability between a French mobile operator and a UK bank. I apologize for the low resolution of this image. As an ex-system architect, I feel nauseous enough just seeing it as it is in any higher resolution, and I wouldn't be able to unsee it. But here you've got multiple systems connecting to each other, moving login tokens and then bits of data between themselves and between relying parties, and there's attribute exchanges, and it's really, really complicated. And it's no surprise this didn't go anywhere. And also all of these hubs and attribute exchanges have to be built and paid for by somebody. And there's one important thing missing from this diagram, which is the citizen. The citizen is nowhere to be seen. Okay. So how would you do this in the SSI world? Well, in that previous example, the French identity issuer would issue an identity credential to the person. The person would go to the UK and present proof of that to the bank. And this is the reason why there is so much traction coming around a decentralized SSI approach. And not only that, but once that person has that identity credential, they can use it anywhere for any purpose. So you're unleashing the power of the data and giving that power to the person. And it's like moving from the old walled garden CompuServe portals. Do anyone remember CompuServe? Many, many years ago, to the open internet. It's like that. You're moving from a closed loop identity system to an open identity system. And the benefits of that are going to be huge, massive innovation. You know, like paper credentials, you can have digital credentials for any purpose. Anyone can issue them. Your corner shop down the road can issue you a loyalty credential without needing to get approval from anyone. Your kid's school can issue end of term reports as credentials. Anyone can accept credentials about anything. And because the underlying protocols enable you to verify the data was given to that person and it's authentic, and you can verify where it came from, so you know whether to trust its source, and it hasn't been tampered with, you get all of that built in. There's another realization dawning as well, which is that a credential exchange platform is an incredibly useful and flexible thing to have. Once an organization has deployed a credential exchange platform, it could be used for many things. The same platform can be used for credentials for people and credentials for organizations, for many corporate ID applications, and also for connected things such as cars or heat pumps. And with the impending arrival of various metaverses, you'll need to know who's legitimate and who's an imposter in your metaverse, just like in the real world. So the same platform is multi-talented. And of course, this is what we're betting on at Evernym, our credential exchange platform. Our flagship product, Verity, is intended to do all of these things. So it's massively exciting. Another way to think of it that I really like this, and it seems to resonate with a lot of people, is that the citizen is now your API. You give the data to people, and the people will carry this data for you from one place to another. You no longer need to technically knit all these systems together behind the scenes in the background. You don't need to have legal contracts between all the parties. I mean, you don't do that for paper documents, so why do it for digital ones? So it's this we've been in this kind of temporary situation waiting for this solution to come along. So now your citizen is your API. Let's look now at the world of eIDAS a bit more. There's been a lot of investment into the European digital identity scheme, eIDAS. Lots of participants taking part, lots of identity providers, governments with nodes that connect to each other. And not just the technology, but the governing authority, the policies, the governance framework about how it should work, how you assure someone's identity is valid, what that data looks like, what the process looks like. So you don't want to throw that away. And we're not going to throw it away. The answer is to evolve and enhance what's been done already and move it into a world where you keep what you've done already and add in the ability to have digital credentials. So if we take eIDAS 1 as an example, you've already defined rules, policies, assurance levels. You've got identity verifiers in place already. You can add SSI capabilities to this and move from a closed ecosystem to an open one. So the first thing you might start doing is that when a citizen goes to a trusted service provider, an IDP, and does an ID check and gets an account in the way they normally do, well, you can offer them a credential at the same time. So once they've done that, say, would you like a credential with that? A bit like, would you like fries with that? Would you like a credential with that? Yes, please. And that's the first anchor credential that person will get. What we'll see as well is governments will be issuing credentials themselves directly rather than getting IDPs to do it for them. So there's going to be an interesting mix and see how that evolves. A lot of people don't know that with SSI-based protocols, you also get secure messaging for free as part of that. So you've got secure messaging in there as well. And those existing verifiers that already use the eIDAS, you can add the ability to do DID-auth-based login, for example. You can do credential-based onboarding, in which you can pass a lot more data than you can with the current eIDAS mechanism. And of course, you can do secure messaging. And once the person is onboarded, that existing verifier can give that person a credential to say they're a customer. And that can be used in other places as well, so that the ecosystem grows. And of course, the governing authority will need to update its rules and policies. And moving on to what happens next. Well, once you've got this open ecosystem there, you can have many, many more issuers coming in to issue many more credentials of different types. It's open, anyone can do it. So you'll get obviously very highly regulated government-related issuers, and you'll also have this platform on which you can have open issuance of any credential for any purpose, and that's what's going to create a lot of innovation. And of course, you can have tens of thousands or millions of new verifiers, not just in Europe, but around the world, who can immediately, instantly verify these capabilities. And we think that there will be really nice utilities that will be developed, some of them no doubt by ourselves, for those verifiers. They can instantly request and verify this kind of data. And of course, they can do real-time passwordless, usernameless login as well. They can do secure messaging, and they can issue their own credentials, and so it grows. So it's no surprise that eIDAS 2 is coming. The European Union published a proposal a few months back, and this is a pretty messy slide, right? But I just want to describe the top right, the big paragraph at the top. The evaluation of the eIDAS regulation revealed that the current regulation falls short of addressing new market demands, mostly due to its inherent limitations to the public sector, the limited possibilities and complexities for online providers to connect to the system, its insufficient availability of notified eID solutions in all member states, and its lack of flexibility to support a variety of use cases, etc. Furthermore, identity solutions outside the scope of eIDAS, such as those offered by social media providers, and no prizes for guessing who they are, raise privacy and data protection concerns, etc. So there's the realization that eIDAS as is, okay, it's been great to get things moving, but there's an evolution coming. So this proposal has a lot of SSI focused terminology, like user-controlled identity, each user controlling their own online interactions and presence, selective disclosure of attributes, things we're very familiar with in the SSI world, European Digital Identity Wallet, a wallet trust mark. So we can see the way this is going. It's very, very exciting, and we're delighted to see this kind of wording coming out in a document like this. And the last thing I want to leave you with in this kind of formal bit of the presentation is that there's regulation that will come out, but that is an opportunity. It's not something to be scared of. It's not a threat. This is paragraph 28. So it says transport, energy, banking, financial services, security, health, water, postal services, etc., should accept the use of European digital identity wallets. That is not a threat. That is fantastic news, because those businesses, those organizations can benefit from instant, very low cost, very secure private customer onboarding with the user's consent that's going to be GDPR compliant. They'll benefit from private business to customer communications through secure communications capabilities you get with DIDCOM. And they'll be able to issue their own credentials for any use case as well. So there's a massive opportunity here that's coming on the back of this eIDAS 2 proposition. So with that, I hope that's given everyone a good intro, and you feel the sort of excitement we feel about this as well. We're now going to cut to, so let me just stop the share here. Thank you. And let's bring in Christine and Drummond. Actually, somebody said, oh yes, there we go, that's covered already. Please could you share the presentation? Yes, all the presentations get shared. There'll be a recording of the webinar, etc., etc. Loads of chat coming in. Keep the chat, we like it. I can't respond because I'm too busy talking to everyone, but somebody else will. And keep the questions coming in, because Alex is grabbing those. So hopefully that set the scene. So let's find out more things that are going on in the world there. So maybe Christine, I can come on to you first on that topic of the evolution of eIDAS. Do you agree as well this evolution is needed, and what are you seeing as the wider implications? What do you think is going to happen as it evolves?
I think evolution is desperately needed. I think eIDAS was very narrow. The first eIDAS was very narrow to a very subset of users and use cases. And in order for digital identity to really be adopted and used widely by everyone and every organization, it needed an evolution. And it needed to get to the point where organizations have the right rails to enable all of us to be using it, right? And to use it cross-border, cross-country, so on and so forth, and cross-sector for many, many different use cases. And I think without the eIDAS 2 coming in, I think that would have made it very, very difficult, because otherwise it's all going to be done in siloed.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think about that? That last bit about the opportunity for private sector organizations, because the eIDAS has been quite kind of log into this government website, right?
I think the opportunity for private sector is really now, because how many times do I interact with my government, and how many times do I actually really want to interact with my government, right? Yeah. And there are times when I do, and there are times when and you kind of think, well, in the future of public services as well as private sector services, it's all about user-centric identity. I think we have heavily advocated for it from Accenture in conjunction working with the World Economic Forum, and one of the key things is really about user centricity and serving me as an individual. All the organizations I interact with, whether it's the different government departments, the different private sector services, whether it's a bank, a hospital, the NHS, HMRC that I need to pay my taxes to, as well as Accenture, my employer, and so on and so forth. I think that aspect of private sector being akin to the sort of acquired network, to be able to use my identity, to be able to trust my identity, and that will help me to reduce the fact that I have to keep, so many of my credentials everywhere, so that I can share one set of, fewer sets of trusted credentials, and I can just get on with doing what I need to do, versus having to log in, having to deal with all this credentials management, which is just a pain. So really, for private sector, save some money and use what is there as a guardrail and get involved to use it, so that they don't have to build the same systems over and over again. Yeah,
I think that's really apt. I think the comfort blanket of in the eIDAS 2 case, some really good trust frameworks, although people won't know there's a trust framework, right? But they're going to see some kind of trust mark, and they'll know there's something that backs up, and they'll have confidence in that. That's going to be a real trigger. So actually, coming on to Drummond, you're the guru of trust and governance frameworks. A question here, can you describe the differences between federated identity frameworks that governments were implementing back in 2010 in the dark ages, and the decentralized frameworks that you're actually involved in helping to create at the moment with governments?
Andy, it's a perfect question. So when we formed, back in 2010, we formed the Open Identity Exchange, or OIX, because what was happening is federated identity systems and the technologies, the standards were coming, they were getting mature enough that governments around the world were saying, oh, we should, we can better serve our citizens by starting to accept federated identities. And the specific use case that drove the formation of OIX was the U.S. government. The Obama administration came in and said, we want to, start digitizing more of the U.S. governments, where we want to make it easier for citizens to interact with the government through, self-serve portals and agencies. So we want to start accepting identity credentials from private industry. But in order to do that, we don't just need the protocols. We actually need, policies and rules that we know they're abiding by. So we need, they call them trust frameworks, and OIX was put together to develop these trust frameworks. And we did, here in the US and the UK, a number of countries around the world. The fact that we put all that effort in there. I just recently was in a conversation with the government where, now we're working on governance frameworks for a decentralized identity. And it just hit me like one of those lightning bolts, like, oh my God, this is, how much simpler it is now. Because when you think about a federated identity system, what had to happen in that case, the US government had to say, what are the rules under which we will accept these credentials from these federated identity providers out there in the industry? And so they basically had to come up with a set of rules that the identity providers would agree to follow, which their partners would need to follow within the federation, that then ultimately the citizen would have to, it's like that Frankenstein diagram that you showed, versus what have governments done for, centuries? They have given credentials to their citizens, right? And so a decentralized identity governance framework is, oh, what's the credential we're going to give to our citizens? We already know the policies under which we do it, and that's all that has to happen. We have to say, oh,
it's almost it's like, oh yeah, why didn't we think about that before? But you did think about it before, which is why we're here now. So.
I do like to, when people bring that up and sort of go, wait a minute, this is obvious, why weren't we doing it? Yeah. There's a good answer. It's the underlying, the cryptography, the digital, cryptographic infrastructure that's necessary. It's not trivial, right? And yes, we did need to evolve into this third generation to provide that infrastructure, what now we refer to as the trust over IP stack. But once that's available, once that infrastructure is there, once we have, the verifiable credential and DID standards, now it really is pretty obvious. And I mean, we're going to talk more about that, but I love the fact eIDAS is definitely one of the lighthouse projects. We have Tim Bauma and others here from Canada. They're doing just fantastic work in that area, and they've even formed, been public about a collaboration. So as governments, this light bulb goes on and they start issuing those credentials, I think it's gonna, it's gonna start to turn into an avalanche.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the Canadians have been in the lead for this for some years now. I was just blown away when I saw the eIDAS 2 proposal come out, and it was like they'd asked us to write it, which we didn't do, by the way, but it's like, it's really good. I'll just take a quick question from Mohit that's just come in. Will the credentials be required to be saved in blockchain, in a blockchain? Drummond, do you want to, this is every webinar we get this one, which is great. Good question, Drummond. Answer? No.
I just want to leave it clear.
Yeah.
I have a...
all the data moves at the edge, right?
Absolutely. No. Seriously, I would actually say the first when I had to on another webinar to sort of go back to the history of how we got here, and the early, everyone called it blockchain identity. We're going to have blockchain identity, right? And still, there's a perception, oh, blockchain's at the center of doing all this. We rapidly figured out, oh, wait a minute, you just need a blockchain for one thing: decentralized public key infrastructure, right? You just, if you can decentralize that, we can have the infrastructure. Everything else takes place off-chain, privately, no credentials for individuals, for, when privacy is involved. Public credential registries, right, for businesses, organizations, that's a thing. And in fact, the British Columbia, government, BC government digital trust services team, pioneered that with a Hyperledger project, and they have it. It's, I'll put the link in the chat, the org book and the verifiable organization network. That's public registry for publicly, public credentials for businesses. For individuals, no, all off chain, all privately.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So let's just bring that back now to Christine. So Christine, you've had quite a lot of experience in Aadhaar as well in India, haven't you? And it's huge. It's a massive implementation of identity for citizens across. I can't even remember how many people are on it now. A billion, up to a billion maybe, or something. If you were to design that now, what would you do differently, do you think?
I think one of the, and Accenture at the time was involved in the biometrics part specifically, and in helping build the biometrics part. And because part of it, part of our legacy is really do a large scale biometrics infrastructure program for government and borders. And I think one of the, what would I do differently, or what would the firm do differently? I think one of the things is really to ensure that we take things like privacy and security very seriously, and have a view of thinking that where are the big risks? What is deemed as okay and acceptable today might not be the case in 10 years' time. And this is some of the challenge with Aadhaar. I think it absolutely needs to be applauded that look at the adoption. If anything, can that level of adoption, I mean, they really ought to be applauded. And the fact that the use cases, that everyone, all the organizations use it, or, and it's value, and that you don't even have to read. You can have, it's very inclusive as a system, but thinking through, what could we have done better is probably thinking through that, well, at the time, the country didn't really have a lot of data privacy legislation, and it wasn't a huge concern. But now, of course, sort of 10 years on, when, all of the news came out with the Supreme Court and so on and so forth, it wasn't something that they could plan for at the time. None was cybersecurity such a big thing at the time. So applying that continuous improvement, the understanding of how has your risk posture changed, and how has the world around the systems changed? Much like what Drummond was saying around sort of from federated to decentralized. Well, things have changed. The cryptography capabilities have changed, and therefore the risk have changed. The ability to hack have changed. The sense of privacy have also changed. What is acceptable and not acceptable has also changed. So thinking of that is having sort of more due diligence around making sure that we plan ahead for the future, and also working with the client to understand that, well, things may change. You've got to have that aspect of agility to be able to build into the change and test out much more what will be acceptable and what won't be acceptable.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The change of risk posture, that really resonated actually. So basically, if the Indian government wants to SSI enable Aadhaar, they'll just give you a call, right? I'll pop your email address.
Let's give all of us a call, right? We'll do it together.
Fantastic. Now let's just come on to another question actually about mobile driving licenses. And this is going to come to you, Drummond. There's been quite a lot of activity around MDL, mobile driving licenses, and a new ISO standard to specify how they work. And there's been quite a lot of activity happening in the US. So the question is, I see that Apple controls the whole process and even requires states to get Apple's approval for PR about if a state was to issue mobile driving licenses, the state has to get Apple's okay for what they say about it, by the sound of it. And also the online mobile driving license use means a DMV can see where that person's using their mobile driving license. Which is a bit anathema to us SSI people, where we separate verifiers from issuers. So is it going to take off, Drummond? There's a lot of Apple wallets out there and so on. What do you think?
It's an extremely good question, and it's I have to say it's a painful answer, because is it a good thing that a wallet's already in the hands of I think it's over 1 billion individuals would accept a digital driver's license, and that in this case US states are going to start issuing them? You can't really challenge that functionality. Yes, digital credentials, government issued. The painful part about it is is it an open standard? Yes, an ISO standard is an open standard. Is it an open standard that is equally available to all vendors? It is actually an open ecosystem. I think that's a
Have you tried transferring? Taking your mobile driving license from your Apple wallet and putting it in your Google wallet? You tried that one?
That's a very, very good question. Now, Google's also said, hey, we're going to support the MDL standard too. But there's a lot of tension between the MDL standard, developed at ISO, and the W3C verifiable credential standard, which had a much broader participation of called the web and open source community, and then of course the open source projects like Hyperledger or others. So it's I think the downside is it is largely perceived as a closed ecosystem, and one that is, gives a unhealthy advantage to dominant vendors. There's also, as you said, there are significant privacy issues. We consider them very significant privacy issues. They'll talk about, you can do selective disclosure, and there are some capabilities for that, but there's no ZKP-based capability. And there's an inherent phone home aspect to the architecture, which frankly, I find, very surprising. So the good news is there is discussion. There's sort of folks in the MDL community that are working to say, how does this actually how are we going to get this together with a verifiable W3C verifiable credentials? How are we going to address these privacy issues? Andy, the one thing I can say it's going to be a disaster if I have to use one wallet for one family of credentials, and the whole other wallets for the open standard ecosystem.
Well, exactly. I mean, is my local school going to have to get in the queue with Apple in order to have their my kid's annual report credential defined as an Apple approved credential, or will they just issue it as an SSI based credential? But on that topic of wallets, let's come back to Christine. The eIDAS 2 proposal makes it clear that digital wallets are the way forward, right? And it looks like states will be able to create their own, or they'll be able to get one from the EU, or they'll be able to enable an ecosystem of wallet providers to come, which is awesome. So do you think the EU would accept a Google or a Facebook or an Apple wallet? I mean, the EU and those guys seem not to get on very much.
Great question and testing question. I think the big techs needs to, at least hit. I think EU is then more than ever needs to set out a set of standards. What is acceptable, what is not, and in order for the OEMs to meet those standards, whether they are Google, Apple, or anything else, right? In that sense, that if they're going to issue wallets for something else that isn't going to be sitting isn't going to be a native wallet from the phone, then I think it's essential for the governments to get ahead of this, because ultimately, if they have like anywhere else that they have control, like the phoning home, the example that Drummond just gave, that aspect EU needs to consider that now and think about, well, if they don't have guidelines around it, and be able to say to the OEM, this is how we want it to be, and this is how it will satisfy our privacy and data protection requirements, as well as how we see the future of the tech, and how do we protect people from unintended consequences, or in some cases, intended consequences that may be negative, right? So that aspects of protection and inclusion that the governments need to get ahead of, I think is critical for them to guide and the OEMs towards the right path, rather than sort of retrofitting it the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's just made me think of something. I think it's really profound, because the eIDAS 2 specs that will come out, and what I've seen so far, they're looking really awesome. There's some incredibly bright people writing them at the moment who are very well informed. And when those specs come out, maybe that is going to push the big, Google, Apple, Facebook, etc. If they want to be in this space, they're going to have to go and create open ecosystems and open wallets, and that's got to be good, right? Let's come on to. Sorry, did you want to just?
No, just agreeing that it's got to be good. It's got to be open, and like anything else, a bit like Visa, MasterCard, and Amex. There's a set of standards. A number of banks who meet those standards can issue the cards, and that's how and merchants who have these capabilities can accept the payments. And if there has to be a level of openness to it, doesn't mean everyone will meet the standards, but that
and what should they?
Exactly, and but the aspect of standards needs to be met in order to create a fair and open ecosystem.
Yeah, it's going to be just fascinating to see how this evolves. And the EU are moving really quickly. Actually, they're nailing down the overview specs by the end of this month, right? And they're going to put them out, and then there'll be detailed specs coming pretty soon after. So it's not like it has been in the past. It's taken years and years. They're motoring, which is really impressive. Then they're not the only one. There's other governments out there that we're speaking to that are just inspirational with their vision about what they want to do. A bunch of other questions coming in. We'll just throw this one back to you, Drummond, here from Kai John Ear. Hi, Kai. Do you think government is the major enabler to adoption of SSI? If we can't get governments or financial institutions to be the issuer, do you envisage it being very challenging for the ecosystem to flourish? That's an interesting one, isn't it?
It's a very good question, and I'm going to give a sharp answer. Do I think that it's absolutely required? No. And the reason is, Andy, you put out the case, there are too many benefits to digital credentials from all types of issuers. It's a little bit like asking the question, well, if only governments, did websites, if we had to have governments do websites, would the web, was that necessary for the web to succeed? No. Do we have government websites? Absolutely, but they don't need to be the only ones. Now, it's different with credentials. Will governments issuing credentials have a huge influence on adoption? Absolutely. I was giving another webinar this morning to the Frankfurt group, and I got permission to read this quote from Francis Gross, who's the senior advisor of the European Central Bank. And he said, verifiable credentials, in his opinion, would only be successful overall if sovereign nations issue digital credentials that other sovereign nations will accept. Now, I mean, look at the passport today. That's how we do international travel.
Yeah.
As that happens, his comment was, as soon as that happens, and as soon as nations start doing that, it's going to be a cascading effect. There's no stopping it, and I think we're already seeing that.
Yeah, I completely agree. At the moment, we've got this strange situation with identity providers, trusted service providers, who the government is paying to verify documents that the government issued in the first place, which is intriguing as a business model. With eIDAS 2 and other schemes that we're seeing being set up, as soon as governments issue, it does break that catch-22, doesn't it? And I'm really excited to see how eIDAS 2 evolves. If it goes down, there's going to be a spectrum, isn't there? There's going to be a sort of SSI maximalism at one end, and at the other end is going to be total centralization, right? And the answer is going to be somewhere in that spectrum. From what I've seen so far, eIDAS 2 is firmly towards the SSI side. Maybe not full SSI maximalism, but there's got to be a comfort blanket for citizens as well, sitting in there somewhere. All right, let's press on. Who is this one from? John West. Hi, John. Any knowledge or experience, Christine, this is for you, any knowledge or experience with what regulations in either US state regulations, US federal regulations, or non-US regulations stand in the way of adopting SSI? Is there anything in the way? I know you're not a lawyer, but you might have come across a few lawyers in your time.
I think that's a great question. Actually, we came across a lot of these issues when we were working on the Known Traveler Digital Identity Program, actually, for both government of Canada, the federal government, as well as the government of Netherlands, and with also a number of our other government clients. Actually, in order to issue and as well as accept a digital identity so that it's legally accepted for cross-border travel, or even not cross-border, even for verifying that I'm who I say I am, and for a purpose of opening a bank account, for example, that this digital credential is as good as my passport or my driving license, basically. Yeah. They need to change laws, and most countries have to have to amend regulations as well as legislation, more importantly, to be able to issue and accept. Most countries don't have that provision today, and we realize that also even with the UK government looking at the trust framework that has been published, right, for us in terms of the proposal. Part of it is about legislation change, and it is, if the government legally cannot issue or accept digital credentials that is as good as a physical one, then it stops everything. So that aspect of legality and the underpinning of trust of the legality is critically important. So I would say almost every, anything that is, whether it's state, whether it's national and international, all needs to be updated in order to get us there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I was talking, as was Drummond this morning, to a government that are just so visionary and innovative in this space. And Drummond, I think you made the point, and they say, look, we're the government, we can do this. It's like, yeah, what a relief. That's music to our ears. But I think the point, Christine, that there are a lot of regulations that might have to be changed is a really important one to make them acceptable. And I think the in the eIDAS spec proposal, there's a lot in there that talks about what that onboarding regulation would be. What, how do you get a wallet? How do you know it's a wallet that's certified to be secure, for example? So that's what I talk about around the comfort blanket. So maybe a lot of that for Europe will come out of that eIDAS regs. Here's another one for you, Drummond, coming over. This is your favorite topic here. This is from Doug B. Hi, Doug. Are you going to discuss a web of trust or some such method for providing relying party verifiers with guidance on which issuer DIDs are trustworthy for a given purpose? Now, Drummond, it's like you know about this sort of stuff, isn't it? Which is why I asked you. I think you might know a bit about this. How's this going to work? How will people actually primarily know an issuer is good or a verifier is good? How will verifiers know that issuers are trustworthy? How does that work?
Absolutely. So I'll keep the answer short. The short answer is digital governance frameworks that credentials are associated with, and the capabilities in those digital trust ecosystems for the governing authority or group to either provide trust registries as a service where issuers are registered and verifiers can be registered. And then when you present a credential, a verifier can check, is that a trusted issuer? For example, I had a travel pass, Andy. If you're going to accept that, you need to know that if it's a test result, it came from a lab that's authorized to do that, or a vaccination, right? IATA runs a trust registry to do that. They maintain that for the airline industry. The beauty of this open standard architecture is you can have any number of trust registries for any ecosystem, for a country, for an industry. And that's, and again, you can verify that an issuer is authorized. You can verify that a verifier is authorized. If you're going to present sensitive data, you want to know it's not a phishing site, right?
Yeah.
And that, if you're interested in that topic, I do have to make an advertisement. Please, trust over IP. That's what
That's where it's at.
That's where
it's actually, I was really, again, pleased to see in the eIDAS 2 proposals and in some of the technical working documents that are being produced at the moment, it's there, trust lists, right? And how do you know the wallet's trusted? And I think that's going to be really necessary for consumer confidence, in the same way that you see Visa logo, MasterCard logo, you're good there and you've got to come back if it goes wrong and so on.
Andy, I'll make the point. Every government that we're talking to is planning on certifying the wallets, the digital wallets and agents for use in their ecosystem. It makes total sense. Yeah,
and I think again there's going to be certified issuers, right? Like government approved ones that are doing high assurance issuing of important credentials. But then there's going to be this whole world of uncertified ones doing whatever use case they want. And there you've got as you say, your other ecosystems of trust that coexist. And maybe overlap with each other as well. We're going to really try really hard to finish on time today for the first time in any of our webinars ever. So let's do one more. This one's from Will O. So hi there, Will. And who wants this one? Well, let's throw this at somebody from a company that does lots of deployments of complex systems. So Christine, coming your way. How do we make it easy for a company to get self-sovereign identity without complete replacement of current authentication, identity, and authorization workflows?
Great question. I think the whole line that I go down typically is that this is an augmentation. It doesn't rip and replace any of your existing IAM solution, and it shouldn't actually, because your IAM solutions, whether it's consumer-based or enterprise or both, still got to exist. It is not about one versus the other. It's actually, your password haven't replaced your enterprise passwords and ID. there are the connectivity between the potential replacement is getting rid of the passwords, but that's the bit of intersection. Everything else is around using my identity beyond the sort of enterprise or organization, much like how I use my passport. And then there is the whatever I need to do within, you know, my workplace or whatever else that is enterprise. And they don't need to be, they go hand in hand together. So it should be an augmentation versus a rip and replace. And it should be actually relatively quick and easy. Once they get the governance sorted out and, you know, use standard-based technology, it should be relatively quick and easy.
Yeah, and the tech actually is a relatively small component of the overall thing. And I'm sure that you'll have a team of people ready to, you know, take on such work as it comes up. So listen, we're going to end it there. We're going to end on the hour. I think that's the first time we've done that for a long time. There are a load more questions coming in. I do want to be respectful for people's time, and there's been just phenomenal attendance. The chat's been brilliant. I've been trying to watch it over there, and there's this screen over here, and all the Q&A coming in. It's been awesome, really interesting. So thank you very much to everyone who's come along. Particular thanks to Christine and Drummond for being really informative, bringing your experience and expertise to bear on this one. Keep an eye on our website for the next webinar in the whole world of SSI. Things are moving so quickly, it's just an epic place to be in at the moment. Sorry for those people whose questions we didn't get to. Better luck next time, come on the next one. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks guys, bye-bye.